Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. This is a talk on secure mobile with mobile device management. My name is Mike Hatfield and I'm lead engineer of the mobile team at Alfresco. We have 3 mobile groups at Alfresco. We have a team writing iOS applications. We have an Android team can deliver them. And one of the apps we delivered earlier in the year was Alfresco for Good, which is in the App Store now, and that's our solution for mobile device management, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that and showing a demo of that later on. First, I wanted to cover security overview of mobile in general and how problems are starting to arise in the enterprise. Talk a little bit about BYOD and what is MDM, and then move on to good technology and Alfresco's solution. So those of you with phones, and I'm guessing it's everyone in this room, know that there's various options for securing them out of the box, ranging from 4-digit pins to swipe patterns on Android, complex passwords, and obviously more recently, and in the news quite a lot, fingerprint access. These are great to a certain extent. They tend to stop the casual hacker. They'll probably give you enough time if you lose your device to change passwords and things like that, but they're not an enterprise solution to security. The other common thing you find in all the app stores are apps that have locks themselves. So there'll be a custom user interface ranging from copying the device's PIN entry code to passwords to swipe entries. These, without fail, give you a false sense of security. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in a couple of minutes. But there are very simple ways of hacking these apps, so please don't put any confidential information into them. The other problem with mobile phones is that they used an awful lot for password resets and for your personal device for two-factor authentication. If you lose the phone, often it's a scramble to reset all your passwords before someone gets hold of it and does that for you, or uses the device to authorize a two-factor authentication to do it themselves. So this is another problem that mobile vendors are having at the moment, and it hits enterprises. So when people leave iPads on aeroplanes, phones in taxis, you name it. So just thinking about these apps that offer secret photo storage, store your passwords and credit cards. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about apps like 1Password and KeepPass here that are very professionally developed and have proper security teams behind them. These are the one-man in his bedroom apps, very much billed as secure storage, store your dodgy photos so that if your wife gets your phone, she can't see them, kind of thing. That's fine to a certain extent, depending on your morals. And often they go to huge lengths to add fake security user interfaces to the front of these apps. There's one I found that has mimics the Android swipe interface, and if you get it wrong, it'll take a photo using the front-facing camera and log where you are and who you are. The idea being you can go in and see who's trying to break into your phone. All very nice as a technical solution, all very useless. There's an app called PhoneView. There are other apps out there. I think there's one called iExplore, and there's some Windows variations. And what it lets you do is quite legitimately go in and browse a mobile device's file system. So you can go in, even on non-jailbroken devices, you can go in and look inside the sandboxes of apps. And it's legitimate in that you can use it to back up photos, back up messages, emails, and back up those sandboxes. But it's also a great hacking tool because people assume that the data is safe, especially in these apps from the App Store. So all you need is a hacking tool that's actually provided with every mobile phone that comes out of the shop. And there it is. That's your hacking tool, once you've got PhoneView. I tested all 14, I think there's 14 of these apps from the App Store so that you don't have to. And I put photos into them and went through all the password sequences and the secure storage and everything else, connected them to PhoneView, and without fail, every single one of them, I could pull those photos off. No problem at all. There's no encryption within those apps whatsoever. So the security is very much very thin layer of UI on top. There's no security in that app whatsoever. So that was more of a don't trust this app, don't think that that's a quick solution. Let's think about a typical enterprise, and this may reflect what your company looks like, certainly reflects what our company looks like. What tends to happen is that a security guy will arrive, IT guy, and he'll build his network and make sure that all the desktops are locked down and the servers are all well inside the firewall, and no one can get in from the outside. So he does some penetration testing. They can't get in, and he's happy, so he goes away. And he lets the users in. And the users are happy because they're inside the firewall, their Office documents are nice and secure on the servers, their desktops are locked down, everyone's happy. This was true up until a few years ago when this happened, BYOD, or bring your own device. All of a sudden, people have got hugely powerful computers, connected computers in their pockets, and they're walking around your firewall with them. And often, the devices will be allowed onto your networks through one way or another, whether it's USB cable into the laptop, whether it's access to the Wi-Fi networks, or through an SD card. And this is a real problem for security in enterprise. And people are just starting to realize that it needs a proper solution. So it's slightly unfair to pick out Dropbox, because it is a very useful app in its place, but there is what we like to call the Dropbox problem. And the Dropbox problem is this. So you've got your enterprise with the lockdown desktops and servers, and your users are all suddenly buying these shiny new mobile phones and bringing them into the office and connecting them to your Wi-Fi. And often they'll beat down the IT guys who can get connected because they might be mobile and it's just easier to work that way, and they can have their documents on the road. The problem is they then install apps like Dropbox. Dropbox gives you very easy ways of sharing documents to anyone. Anyone, whether they've got Dropbox or not, whether they're inside your enterprise or not. I'm sure most people here have probably heard of, if not installed, Dropbox, and you may even use it daily. How many secure documents do you put in it? Dropbox looks at every chunk. It chunks the content, and it reads the content of every single document that gets uploaded, so that they can reduce the amount of storage they need. They do data deduplication on your confidential documents, just so you know. And here's the problem. As soon as the documents go onto the mobile devices, they're not in your enterprise anymore. They're in Dropbox's servers. And this is the Dropbox problem. You've lost control of your confidential documents. Suddenly, they're out in the cloud, and all your security is now dependent on how secure Dropbox is. And I'm not going to judge whether they're secure or not. I'm sure they've got some very good security teams. But the point is, it's not in your control anymore. So this creates a couple of risks. First risk is uncontrolled copies. Let's say you have an employee, they want to get a document, it might be confidential medical documents, to a hospital. They figure, what's the easiest way of doing this? Well, I'm not allowed to email them because that's sort of frowned upon, but hey, look, I've got access to Dropbox, so I'm going to talk to the medical team, and they've got access to Dropbox as well. So here are my secure documents, and we can just share them over Dropbox. The problem is that copy at the top that remains in the Dropbox servers. And anecdotal evidence would state that it remains there even if you manually delete it for this deduplication effort that they do. So here's your business risk number one, is that you've got uncontrolled copies of your confidential documents floating around in the internet, in the cloud. The other problem is loss of ownership. So the link between your confidential documents in this situation is between the user and their device and Dropbox. Your IT security teams are nowhere in that link. The problem comes when this guy turns up. I don't know if this works in Europe, this will work in the UK. I need to swap it for America. So suddenly, this guy's been fired. You can consider his device to be rogue. He's gone out of the building, he owns the device, he owns the Dropbox account, he's got ownership of your documents and you haven't. That's a huge business risk that you've lost ownership for those documents. This is all very negative, I don't mean it to be, it's just kind of pointing out the risks. So let's talk about MDM. MDM is mobile device management, and it aims to help with data control and protection, thereby reducing, it also reduces support costs and also reduce business risks. The data control and protection, that's done by centralizing access to the content within the MDM system on the app. So if your device gets lost, if your user gets fired, centrally, you can disable access to all that content. This would also reduce support costs because you can provision those users remotely as well. So you can provision and support your users remotely through these MDM technologies. You can set which servers they want to talk to. You can limit their access to those servers. And you're also reducing business risks by doing that because you can immediately cut off access to your confidential content when that device or user is compromised. There's various MDM vendors out there, and we've been talking to all of them. Some of the bigger ones are Good Technology, Symantec, obviously well known for their desktop antivirus software, Citrix, and Mobile Iron. And they all tackle the MDM problem in slightly different ways, and they've all got their own proprietary ecosystems that enable data to flow between apps securely and talk securely back to your servers. And whereas there are some standards for MDM, guess what? They don't follow them. They're all proprietary. Having said that, that also does mean you're not limited to using just one. If there's certain apps or services on one vendor and you need some services on another vendor, as far as I know, they will sit very happily together on the same device and they'll be separated from each other and still remain secure. The approaches these companies take are also very, very different. Good Technology go in at a very, very low level in your application and take control of all your data and all your networking. Mobile Iron are more of an optional component, so you can actually, whereas it's not possible to ship an app on the Good platform without saying you must use Good Technology with this app, you can do that for Mobile Iron. The Mobile Iron code in your app remains dormant until it finds another Mobile Iron app on your device. So there's some very different ways that people have come to solve these problems. Let's talk a bit more about Good Technology. So Good Technology have a lot of rules that we must follow as app developers and app vendors. All data must be encrypted. Now they enforce this by getting into your app at a very low level, and they will enforce that any networking goes over their code and their servers, and any data is stored in their secure system on the device. The advantage of networking going through good servers is that you don't need any inbound firewall rules for your mobile users. This is something that we've configured for our own access. We use Alfresco for Good on our own devices, and we have a 4.2 server, Alfresco server internally at Alfresco. Normally, you need to access a VPN. You need to be on a VPN to access it. 9 times out of 10, you launch the app and you forget if you're using the non-MDM version of the app. So you have to come out, connect the VPN, go back in. With the Good Technology solution, there's a proxy server that talks to Good that allows these mobile devices to come in once they've been authenticated and to check that they haven't been locked out, and they can talk directly to our internal servers. There's no way of accessing them, of accessing our internal server over the internet except via this secure good system, and no firewall rules were required for that. In fact, the proxy server that we have set up doesn't even have an internet address. Good also determines that you must follow best practices. And this is very much to compensate against the PhoneView app problem that I talked about earlier. So no temporary files, which actually caused us a bit of a problem during the development of our app, because there are certain features of iOS that generate temporary files themselves. And we worked together with Good to make sure that they were cleaned up as soon as possible. So the time that you could possibly access those was so minimal that it was unfeasible for them to be a problem. No keychain access. Now, this was an interesting one. If you jailbreak your iPhone, meaning you can run apps that aren't on the App Store and you have much wider access, the keychain suddenly becomes insecure. The keychain is where your passwords and usernames are stored for services. There's a keychain on Macs as well, and it's whenever something prompts to save your password, that's where it goes. If you jailbreak a phone, you can get hold of that keychain, copy it onto a desktop PC, and run cracking tools on it. And it's anecdotally not that secure. I'm not a security expert, so I don't know, but I believe it falls over fairly quickly. The other thing Good mandate is that no data must be sent to third-party apps. Now, there's a little asterisk by this. So there's two caveats. The first one is no third-party apps unless they're inside the Good ecosystem themselves. And what that means is, if you look on the App Store for an app like the Alfresco app, like Good Reader, Smart Office, there are often two versions on there. There's a paid-for version, except Alfresco, because we don't charge you, and there's a free version with a little Good padlock symbol on it. And the difference is you need to approach Good and provision that app for your users if it's got the little padlock. And that means that those apps on your device, because they all sit on the Good SDK, they can talk securely to each other. So at no point is your content unencrypted as it's going between the apps. It's a very secure way of providing services like PDF annotation. We don't need to develop that in the Alfresco for Good app, because we can allow Good Reader to open a document, annotate it, and send it back securely, and there's no chance of that document being compromised. The other thing Good technology mandate is that all code must be audited by an external security company called Veracode. And we had to go through this process a number of times through the development of the app. In the end, what we've got is the iOS SDK 1.1 and Objective-CMIS that the SDK uses have passed some very, very stringent security checks on the code. So we were very pleased to have that against the code. What it means is you're not leaking temporary files, you're not storing passwords somewhere, you're not doing stuff in clear text. So it was a good validation anyway, as well as being required by Good technology. So Alfresco for Good. This is the icon you need to look for in the App Store. So we conform to all the things that Good needs. We've got secure connection, so we can connect in without VPNs. Secure storage, everything is in a secure encrypted blob in the sandbox. You can't pull those files off. And policy enforcement, which means that our IT department can prevent an iPad or an iPhone from accessing that content if it's been left in an airplane seat, or it's fallen out of your pocket, or an employee has left through whatever circumstances. So I'm going to give you a quick demo. Because there are certain parts to this that require internet access and everything else, and it's the actual management is inside our firewall. I've done this via videos. It's also, some of this process is a bit slow, so I've sped it up a bit. So the first stage is provisioning a user. Good is very enterprisey, in kind of a good and a bad way. The web app isn't going to win any awards for looking nice or ease of use. But this is your management interface. What I'll do is just expand that. And what I'm doing here is for my user, I'm provisioning an app for me. What that does is that's talking back to the good servers, and it's asking for a secure key. And there it is, ending in 7J2. And the system will email me that and say, here you go, here's a provisioning key. You can install any of the apps you like as long as your company has provisioned them. So you need to approach good and have an agreement with them about which apps you can use. And that's the financial part. That's why the apps are free in the App Store, because you have a financial agreement with good instead of Apple. And Apple kind of tolerate this. I'm really sure what they think about it. So that provisioning key will then let me, as a user, provision an app on an iOS device, and it's a one-time use key. So I get an email, and then I have to type that number into the login box. And I certainly didn't intend to do that live, so I recorded it earlier. And it looks a little bit like this. So I've launched the app, and this is the first thing you see is set up. You need to enter email address. I'm entering the code. I'm not that good at typing. This is sped up about 3 times, by the way. And then it goes through a whole load of activation process to make sure that I can actually use that. My profiler said that I need to set a password. We've dumbed down the rules for our internal demo. And then I'm into the app. And I've already been provisioned with a server. So let me just pause that a second. My policy that my IT admin had set up in the good provisioning portal determined which Alfresco server I can connect to. So I haven't had to type in HTTP tsalfresco.com, worry about port numbers, worry about contexts. All I know is I've got a server called Summit Demo Server, and that's what I'm connected to. That's what I need an email address and username and password for. And that's what I'm logging into here. So continue. Come on. And then we're in a normal share instance. And this is the Alfresco for Good app. It looks an awful lot like the 1.0 app. That was a deliberate decision. We can reuse the assets, and it's familiar to people who are familiar with the non-secured app. And you can see it's just normal browsing. We do have the addition of thumbnails in this version. I can access content as I normally would. But here's the difference. If I try to send that highly secure content somewhere else, to an app that's not in the good ecosystem, I get this problem. I get action not available. Your security policy only allows you to send documents to other good Dynamics apps. That's a policy decision that my IT admin has made. And that was me trying to send that photo to iPhoto. And that would have been leaving the good Dynamics ecosystem and losing control of that document. So the app prevents you from doing that. But is it secure? Well, I did the same test on our app that I did with those other apps from the App Store. So this is PhoneView. And what I'm doing is I'm going into the apps folder, finding Alfresco for Good, and then just having a browse around in the usual areas. So there's nothing in the documents folder, but there's lots of other folders around, including some interesting looking containers and things with GUID names and everything else. But nowhere are those raw PNGs or JPEGs that I could find with the other apps very, very quickly. But because I know iOS, one thing I do know is that it stores a snapshot when you background the app. So I'm going to pull that off to look for confidential information. And we cover that case too. Let me just, can I pull that back? Yeah. So whenever you background this app, and this is something for those of you who are using iOS 7 will notice with the new task switcher, you get the icons across the bottom and screenshots of the app. if we'd have just backgrounded the app, you might have some very confidential information on there, and iOS automatically screenshots that, and it's very easy to pull that off as just a picture, and there you go. So we put a security cover over that when we detect the app is about to be snapshotted. So how do we help with loss management? Well, so this is the interface that the IT admin gets, and you can see that, so this is the iPad I just registered, and I have some actions against it. One of those is I can see the history of that device, so I can see that compliance was enforced. I can prevent jailbroken devices from even having this app running. So compliance was enforced, that was all fine. The application policy, that's the one that tells me which Alfresco server to use, that was all fine. And security was enforced, so there's not been anything strange going on there. So we've got security auditing as well through this system. Now let's say I left this down in the bar at the hotel, left this iPad. I'll call my IT guy and say, I don't know where my iPad is. Please lock the device, please lock the app. So he'd go in here and lock it, and then very shortly afterwards, even if the app's live, the good system will send a message that will lock out the app, and you cannot get in. You cannot, all the keys to that secure storage are also been revoked at this point, so you cannot even get into the content that was in there before. And again, that's a policy decision. You can choose to not have that. But basically, the only way of getting into this app and getting that content now is to talk to the admin and saying, I have the device physically in my control, give me a new key to get in. So that's MDM. I'm going to hand over now to Peter, who's going to talk about some solutions they've got for Android. I'll take questions at the end, if you don't mind solving. I don't want to eat too much into Peter's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Kolarov, and I'm a solution architect from Anasoft, Slovakia. And I should be standing here with Mr. Tomas Vasil, who is a project manager from Cetelem, but unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, so I have few of his notes to read off of. First, let me start with obligatory words about the companies involved. Cetelem Slovakia is a BNP Paribas personal finance company operating in a Slovak market of 5 million people for the last 13 years. And to date, they have delivered about 1.2 million personal loans, mostly in cooperation with their retail partners, such as IKEA. It employs about 200 employees in their two local offices, and each year it prints and archives about 1.6 million sheets of paper, which is roughly equivalent to 23s. Anasoft is a system integrator and a software development house specializing in deployment of highly secure and customized solutions for banking, manufacturing, logistics, and public sectors. For the last 5 years, Anasoft has been focusing on implementation of paperless document systems within these sectors, and thus it was tasked by Cetelem to deploy document management and later eSign project. Both of these projects were Cetelem's answer to global BNP Paribas initiative, Simple and Efficient initiative, which is part of the business plan for BNP Paribas for the next 3 years. The goal of the initiative is to improve operating efficiency and simplify the way BNP Group functions. The initiative set forth by the headquarters in France targeted reduction of internal costs and inefficiencies, and Cetelem has located their #1 inefficiency to be within their case management back office process. And the root of the problem within the process is, of course, paper. Lots of it. Actually, about 1 ton of paper in personal finance contracts that gets printed and archived in Cetelem Slovakia each year. To be more specific, the problem was really a set of multiple issues, all associated with paper. Number one problem was that the complete customer files were getting lost or damaged, usually on some messy desk, or during transfer to another office. And the loss of the files was costing company money in unrecovered loans. The number two problem was that slow document routing of paper was causing too long of a process in loan approval for their retail partners. So the retail partners really saw the money after they sold the goods about 5 days later. And last but not least, handling of paper documents was costing a lot of money on contract, printing, postage, and archiving. So how did we go about the solution? We started, of course, with Alfresco repository. We proposed digital document workflow in the most intensive back office process of case management routing, meaning that most of the personal loan cases were to be scanned, attach some metadata to, and stored in Alfresco. The case management process was implemented as a set of rules and workflows, and it took about 12 months from the beginning of the project when Cetelem decided to start, including analysis, installation, integration to the Cetelem legacy systems, and we had Alfresco up and running. We also had to build a custom document capture to scan existing customer dossiers into the system, and this was mostly due to the reasons of maximal optimization to basically save a few clicks, which made a big difference when you have to scan tens of thousands of files or dossiers. So with Alfresco and scanning stations up and running, we checked off the first two major problems. Personal loan folders were now being routed within back office in digital form only, while expenses associated with lost and damaged files were eliminated. Also, the process became a lot more auditable and not so slow anymore. Unfortunately, paper documents were still being printed in the form of loan contracts for end consumers to fill and sign. In other words, problems with printing and mailing and archiving remained, and not only that, but we actually added a slew of issues associated with scanning. All of these problems and bottlenecks really stayed around solely for the purpose of signing a document and maybe filling a few checkboxes on it. So this is really not that simple and efficient yet. So our solution part two, tablets. Only 1 year after Alfresco Enterprise has been deployed within Cetelem, handwritten electronic signature project eSign started with the goal to dematerialize those paper contracts and forms. The goal of eSign project was to give customers an option to sign personal loan electronically at the point of sale. And just as we hoped, about 90% of consumers prefer this option to the old ways, and this adoption cleared the way for implementing getting rid of paper within the case management process. eSign project had few but very important business requirements. Most of them came from legal department and IT department. Legal department requirement number one was for customers to sign what they see, meaning they didn't want customers to sign a document that a retail person is looking at, but rather what they're looking at. Also, they wanted them to be still able to disagree with paragraphs within the contract. This meant really that the signing experience had to be as closely possible as to the original paper form. IT department had two major requirements, and those were don't touch retail PCs, meaning we could not install any software or hardware within retail partners. And this would be a nightmare from a maintenance point of view, where you would have to manage some kind of a software in an unmanaged environment. Also, they didn't want any more servers within their server rooms. So standard document signing solutions were out of questions. And of course, the whole solution had to be enterprise-grade secure. So how did we build such a self-contained black box solution that would have to meet all those set of requirements? Simple, like this. Now, even though the goal of the Cetelem eSign project was just to build a signing solution, signing electronic document, and this application had to be really very simple to use by the end users, required no training. This was really no easy task, and it required merging a lot of different new technologies together. So we started with Android, Samsung-based Android tablets with a special pen-enabled layer, which is referred to as S Pen. And of course, we had to use Alfresco Mobile SDK for all the CMI's connectivity to Alfresco repository. We use multiple Samsung SDKs, some supporting S Pen, some security features. And we also used our partners, SoftPro SignDoc SDK, to provide support for biometric signature that we needed. And last but not least, we used our own Anasoft Signatus SDK, which merges all these technologies together and makes working with complicated technology a little bit simpler. And now this SDK is actually a part of our solution that we can offer to partners that would like to implement similar solutions. So this was our complete solution. It included Alfresco Enterprise with the workflow processes in the repository and Project eSign. The solution helped dematerialize the forms, but it wasn't quite complete. And the missing part is really not the Angry Birds here. After the Cetelem has decided that they would own and manage all the tablets provided to their retail partners, they did not want any third-party software running, and definitely not Angry Birds on the tablets. So this business requirement really meant only one thing, and that's mobile device management. After deployment of Alfresco and development of mobile application allowing biometric handwritten signature of digital documents, we have deployed our Samsung-only mobile device management, which we have used for our other projects. And even though our MDM is definitely not feature-rich, equivalent to generic MDM solutions, we really mostly focus on single-use devices where device such as this standard mass-produced device becomes one application only embedded device used for the one application that we had. In this case, it was eSign. And we get to the end where we actually managed to solve the problem using multiple technologies, and Cetelem has this way optimized its most inefficient back office process, which was riddled with paper-associated problems. And meanwhile, Cetelem retail partners are benefiting from much faster time to finance after they have sold the goods. And last but not least, consumers don't have to worry about filing at home yet another important piece of paper. Instead, they have a permanent access to the original contract digital copy that they have signed within Cetelem's portal. So getting rid of paper and moving towards true paperless office was a win-win-win solution for all of them. The investment into Alfresco and eSign projects did not only lower paper-associated costs, it gave Cetelem real competitive advantage in the crowded personal finance market space. And did I mention that Cetelem now saves every year small forest of 20 trees, thanks to the documents that never have to be printed. Thank you. And I didn't have time for any demo, so in case somebody wants to see the Cetelem live, I can show them offline. Thanks. I don't know if anybody has any questions soon. Do they have time?
Yeah, just a quick one with the Alfresco for Good iOS app. If you take a normal screenshot, will it also obscure it? So if you take a screenshot of the app using the normal, pressing all the weird buttons and stuff. Okay, it does that as well. Okay.
Yes, I believe they can prevent that in iOS 7. I don't think iOS 6 prevents you from doing that. And there's nothing stopping you using a digital camera taking a picture of the screen either. So there are certain lengths you have to stop at.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much for coming.
Sorry, hi, Olivier Bresson from Saint-Gobain. I'm wondering if your company if your company does not involve into bring your own device, which is the case of our company. Is there any interest of using the container, for example, provided by Good? I understand it could be useful for remote swipe and so on, but for the SDK part, that you may use into your own application, is it useful?
So you're saying whether it's overkill, or what was the? I didn't quite catch the exact question.
Well, as far as I understand, the SDK part of your MDM solution is useful for your personal devices, because you don't have to need VPN and so on. But if you have a mobile phone with VPN certificates and so on, MDM solution could be useful to manage the devices of your employees. But if you are building internal applications, do you have any interest of using the SDK as well?
Yes. So at the moment we don't have the MDM solution in the SDK itself. It's an application-based solution, and it works in tandem with device-wide MDM that Samsung and Google and Apple also provide. So there's lots of different layers, and it's all very much on a case-by-case basis as to what the best solution is and where that MDM solution goes and how whether that sits in the SDK. I'm not sure that answers your question completely. And if you maybe want to catch up afterwards and go into more technical detail, it might be easier, better format. Thank you.
Thank you.